Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Hannah Quinn-Mulligan. Coming up on the show. As drought conditions continue, farm organisations say that time is of the essence for Minister Creed to introduce more GLOS flexibilities.
We need the flexibilities around the certain dates that we've highlighted to the Minister. We need, above all, that low interest loan to be rolled out. And
love them or loathe them, they're part and parcel of most farms in Ireland. We'll be hearing about the best way to control rushes.
A lot of the field, as was said there, is quite heavy in rushes, and a lot of them are seeded out and they're quite tall. And initially, the first thing anyway is if you are going to apply any kind of chemical product, is that what you want is actively growing rushes.
But as mentioned in the first intro, time is ticking for Minister for Agriculture Michael Creed to act. His department has introduced a 2.75 million tillage scheme last week, but farmers are still waiting for details of the scheme. Well, as drought conditions continue, President of the IFA Joe Healy visited farms in Wexford to find out what ground conditions were like on one of the hardest hit counties. He spoke to our correspondent Pat O'Toole. Now, apologies in advance for the background noise. There's plenty of wind on the day, but a distinct lack of rain.
Sure, look, it's every bit as bad as what the county chairman here, James, and Mark and all the other county officers have been telling me for the last few weeks. And I suppose the rest of the country would have all suffered the effects of the drought, even my own farm at home in Galway, and we'd have fed out a lot of silage, we'd have grazed a third of our what we had closed for the second cut. But at least we started getting rain last Saturday fortnight, and we've got a steady amount of it ever since. Even a couple of minutes ago I was talking to my brother-in-law, and it's pouring in Galway this minute. Like down here, what you'd give for that much rain down in this corner of the country. And you know, from a Galway point of view, how often has our area looked to and been helped by farmers in the southeast to send up fodder to the west and the northwest, and it's terrible to see the way they're suffering at the moment. And like, I think what we have to do is get whatever flexibilities can be given from the Minister, whether it's the European Commission, whether it's our own Department of Agriculture. Those flexibilities have to be put in place, and not in a month's time, Pat. You know, straight away. We need to know about those today, tomorrow.
And you emphasised that. I heard Shay Phelan last night at a grain meeting in Enniscorthy stressing the importance of getting catch crops in now, and if there's going to be any derogation, it's useless in 10 days' time. It needs to be now. And look, we have had a pattern with the department where things have been slow to come. And we in the Journal last week, Peter Varley covered the Minister saying that there was going to be a derogation on fallow ground in Gloss, and that still hasn't been delivered. We're getting stories this morning. You probably heard farmers the same as me recounting that they've gone down to the department and it's not happening. So, is there any message we can give to the Minister here today?
Well, look, I think the Minister has to appreciate the tillage crisis fund last year. We weren't crying wolf. You know, we said it would be less than 200 farmers. The department and the Minister was trying to tell us there could be 1,600 in Cork alone. It ended up at 160. We were the IFA weren't crying wolf last back end and in springtime when we were saying there'd be a fodder crisis due to the bad weather. And that's what transpired, and we're most definitely not crying wolf when we talk about the absolute crisis that's out there at the moment. And I think even more important than that, the stress and the pressure that's causing to farmers on the ground. The farmers that we meet here on the farm today, at least we're mixing with each other, we're talking to each other. There's an awful lot of farmers that aren't leaving their own yards, and they're the people that needs to know that there's help out there for them. And look, this is no one silver bullet is going to solve this. You know, we need a whole collection of little things that'll help it. It still mightn't solve it fully, but it'll help it, and at least the farmer will appreciate that the department, the government, the Minister for Agriculture, the EU Commission, we're getting help from them. You know, this is a crisis. There's people that, even at best case scenario, there are great farmers that still won't be able to get enough fodder in by the end of September, October. But we need the flexibilities around the certain dates that we've highlighted to the Minister. We need, above all, that low interest loan to be rolled out. And we need quicker movement from the Department and the Minister. It was extremely disappointing to read, you know, in your own paper in the Farmers Journal that no official request had gone to the EU Commission around those flexibilities. That's unbelievable. It's incredible. You know, I think the Minister and the other politicians in the government, the department, they need to realise immediately the problems that are there and work immediately. Forget about, talking about doing it. We need action, we need real action, and we need it today and tomorrow.
Super. Thanks, Joe. I'm joined here by Joe Brady. Joe, you've been on part of the IFA delegation going around Wexford today. On farm here in MJ Scallon's Dairy Farm. It's burned up fairly badly. What needs to happen for these farmers and for farmers all over Ireland who are suffering from a shortage of fodder and who are looking at a long, long winter? And we still have 2 months of grazing, hopefully, but no grass at the minute.
Well, I think that the first thing that could happen would be, and would be beneficial to all farmers across the country, would be if the fertiliser application dates was put back for at least another month, because there could be a growth on into September, October, and the cut-off date needs to be put back. I think that everybody could benefit from that right across the country and build up maybe a wedge of grass for the months later on.
And that would be a pretty straightforward one. There's a lot of talk about flexibilities around the gloss as well. And do you think that the Minister is ready to act on that? And I suppose the timing of when if he's going to move, he needs to move quickly, doesn't he?
Yeah, he certainly needs to move fast because the time is of essence in here. There's 3 or 4 different issues there that could be relaxed. Fertiliser, maybe low input grasses, and traditional, maybe cutting off traditional hay meadows again. Yeah. Things like that certainly would be a help. For a once off, we really have a national crisis on our hands, and it's quite evident right across the country. No matter what part you go to, there's different problems there. Second cut silage is eaten, not going to be there. There's no fodder available even anywhere in the country, and even across Europe it's scarce. So it's not just going to be a case of switching on a tap and bringing it in from someplace else. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. It's not there. So we have to do things at home ourselves, and they're all different things that could happen just on a once-off basis that would make maybe life easier for everybody and cattle welfare during the winter.
And even with all that, we're in hope territory, aren't we? Because those measures will only be effective if we get the right run of weather. We need it. We need a drop in time, but we can't afford to have it come too wet, especially in your part of the country. The danger is that when it starts to rain, that the heavens will open and we'll be looking at no extended grazing.
Yeah, well, that is a problem. We don't know how long. It's very hard to budget for a winter because I come from Cavan and it's even worse there because you don't know whether you're going to have winter starting in October or November, and then the spring the other end as well. Like we saw what happened last year. If we had a repeat of last year, I know what would happen because there's certainly no fodder. There'll be no fodder travelling up from this part like what happened last year. I think the Minister really needs to go to Brussels, get this once-off concession on these last measures now, not in a month's time. It has to happen now, immediately, and people can plan then ahead.
Joe Brady of the IFA finishing that report there. Now, there was a time when sheep's wool held more value than the meat. But those days are sadly gone for sheep farmers who now believe they're being fleeced by buyers when it comes to wool price. Our correspondent Odile Evans was at Tina Healy's show last weekend, where she spoke to Godfrey Potterton and Evelyn Shannon, who advocated that Ireland could do more to add value to native wool and the benefits passed back to farmers.
You said, was it 3.5 million fleeces leave Ireland every year, is it?
Yes, we've 2.5 million breeding sheep in Ireland, and they're lambs. There's 2.5 million fleeces there every year from that breeding flock, and then some of the lambs are shorn as well to make it up to maybe close to 4 million fleeces. Yeah. That wool, I'm afraid to say, is being talked down by our wool merchants, and our friends are wool merchants, but we have good wool. The wool merchants pack it, send it to Bradford or send it direct to China at what we call a very, very poor price. It's a raw material that's leaving this country for very little recognition, really. It's a biodegradable. It ticks all the green boxes. It won't burn. It's a fantastic product. Back in history, it had a huge value.
And we're getting to the point now where farmers are actually paying more to shear the sheep than they're getting for the wool.
Yes, we're getting about 70 to 80 cents a kilo for the wool. The shearers are charging between €2 and €2.50, and then the helper has to be looked after. So it's about a break even. The mountain sheep are getting less. They're not at a break even. But it's a fantastic product. It ticks all the green boxes. We're bunging up the world, I'm afraid, with plastic all over the place. Wool can be used to replace a huge amount of it, but we need some inventive people to come on board and help. There's an underground movement with a lot of regard for wool, There's a lady here beside me, Evelyn Shannon, and there's a movement to get interest in wool. We're letting it go out of the country for virtually nothing. And there's one other thing on it, and it really annoys me, that back during foot and mouth, wool was in category 3, which is category 3 waste. It's awful. Wool is not awful. Wool is not awful. At the time, yes, it was the correct thing to do, but now we've passed, and that's all in the past. Wool needs to get a decent status, and we need help from Teagasc and the Department of Agriculture and the universities to come on board and help us to add value to it. It's a fantastic product. Everybody's talking about green this and green that. We have the best green material for insulation and all that kind of thing. We need help to find a use for it.
And Evelyn, what do we need in Ireland to add that value to wool?
We need investment, and we need investment in probably a scouring plant and basic facilities for carding it to get it up to that we have added the value on it, rather than sending it to UK or to China and then importing it all back. Because not only are we losing the value on the wool, we're also losing the value on the effluent, which is great on gardens, on land, and so we're losing everything on the wool.
And you have sheep yourself. What kind of breed is good for wool here?
Well, I have Romney sheep, which is fantastic for wool. They're part of the Kent Romney Marsh sheep, but the genetics were changed in New Zealand, and so their wool is much finer. They're a great breed if you want to outdoor lamb late in the season. I've only got 12 ewes, but all my 12 ewes lambed out in the field, brought their 2 lambs in, and that was it.
But I suppose the general consumer will believe merino is the most superior wool. How do we bring Irish up onto that level?
We won't bring Irish up to that level. I don't think we need to compete with merino. Merino is a totally different product. Merino doesn't have the memory that the Romney or that the Blueface Leicester, Godfrey breeds Blueface Leicester. Beautiful, beautiful wool. The microns on it are very low, very fine. The Romney is almost as fine as Blueface Leicester, not quite as fine. But we are going for a slightly different market. Our market is more outer garments. The merino is very much next to the skin, absorbent, right? So it's a different product.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot of overseas people come to Ireland, tourists, and they're going to wool shops looking for Irish wool. A lot of the wool shops until very recently didn't even have wool in it. They had acrylic, but no wool. But we need to have our Irish wool out there, and we need to market our Irish wool and add our value onto it here in Ireland, so that it benefits everybody. Because it'll benefit farmers, but it'll also benefit the manufacturers and the employment, everything.
Odile Evans with that report from Tina Healy Show. Now stay tuned, because still to come we hear from the experts on how to deal with rushes.
Pressure mounts for suckler payments. In this week's Irish Farmers Journal, new report finds income on suckler farms is unsustainable, sector at critical juncture. As a result of the hot weather, the country's potato growers are facing unprecedented challenges. EID changes, but issues still remain. Plus, don't miss our must-read Winter Feed and Finance magazine in partnership with IFA Accountants, packed with top tips for farmers short on fodder this winter. Inside this week's Irish Farmers Journal, on sale today.
They might not be the most welcome sight, but it's common enough to see rushes on most farms across Ireland. With debates raging over whether you should spray, top, or just give up against the spiky green tide, our correspondent Peter Varley went to a demonstration event in Glenfarne, County Leitrim last week, and he spoke to Cian Condon from Teagasc on the best method to combat rushes.
Cian, can you tell me about the event you held here today on dealing with rushes on farms?
Yeah, well, in this part of the world, if you're farming, you're dealing with rushes, and that's just the way things are. It's a fact of life. So this evening's event was to go over a kind of best practice as regards control of rushes in the field, is what you need to do. And then as regards legislation, we had a lady from the department, Claire Fitzsimons, and she went over what the requirements are for the farmers as regards that anyone who, if you're applying sprays with a weed licker, with a boom sprayer, whatever the case is, that under the Sustainable Use Directive that you must have a course in place, and also then for the boom sprayers that the boom sprayer is tested and certified that it meets the requirements. And then finally, the overall idea for this was to make sure that the sprays, and particularly MCPA, don't make their way into watercourses and ultimately into drinking water.
And what is the big issue with that, with MCPA getting into water? Would there be a danger that maybe MCPA, the licence, will go in the future if there are more events, more pollution events happening? Will MCPA be under threat in the future, do you think?
Yeah, a lot of people will be aware that MCPA was in the headlines over the last 12 months, and that it was under pressure in Europe, and that the licensing of it was likely to be pulled, and there was a kind of a last minute reprieve for it. And the issue, certainly in some regions here, not too far away, as you go down to South County Leitrim into Longford, the Lough Forbes catchment, is that they have found a number of breaches of the guideline levels that are found in not just in the watercourse themselves, but also in the drinking water coming out of the taps. And if that becomes not even a regular occurrence, but if it happens on any way regularly, I would imagine that that we could lose these products for the future, and they're a huge part of treating rushes, not just in Leitrim but all around the country.
Okay, very good. So if farmers do have rushes and they want to use their sprays in the right way, not to be causing pollution, what are the best ways of doing that?
Well, the very first thing that they should be doing if they're using a boom sprayer themselves is do the sprayer course, and it is a requirement to do it. And the people that are doing these courses are very well trained, very knowledgeable, and also what's I think very important, very practical, and will speak to the guys exactly about what's required as regards nozzles and speeds and filling the tank and emptying the tank correctly, and the correct management of the actual products themselves. And a lot will be learned by anybody, and as well as that, you're with a group of like-minded individuals who do the same things yourself, and you'll probably learn certain bits and pieces off the other people on the course, and not just off the guy giving the course.
Okay, so do the course is the first protocol.
Absolutely, it's the very first thing, and like there's code of best practice, and that's set down by the as I said, the Sustainable Use Directive as regards filling your tank and where it's filled, the guideline rates. You follow whatever it says on the product label. Make sure you don't fill the sprayer, ideally not on a concrete area. Of course, that washes into watercourses or whatever the case is. There's an awful lot you could put into it about that, and probably especially with MCPA is that you don't spray in unsuitable conditions. So not in wet conditions, not in windy conditions, and to stay well clear. The guideline typically is 5 metres. You really should be staying at least that away. MCPA is quite mobile in the environment, and it's important that you do stay well away from anything that's carrying water.
Keane, in this field we're standing in now, there's very strong rushes. I'd say 90% of the field is covered with rushes. Mm-hmm. They're gone to seed. A lot of them are brown to look at as well. How would you deal with these rushes to get the best kill possible?
Yeah, this field here is rented by the owner, the farmer here. He rents this field, and he's only begun to really put a rush control project in place. A lot of the field, as was said there, is quite heavy in rushes, and a lot of them are seeded out, and they're quite tall. And initially, the first thing anyway is, if you are going to apply any kind of chemical product, is that what you want is actively growing rushes, and actively growing rushes are young and they're green, and that's what you really want. And the best time to treat them is when they're growing their best, which is in the summer months. So topping or ideally mowing them down in a field like this that's quite heavy with rushes, if you can mow them to the ground first and then ideally remove them. The seed heads contain, as I mentioned earlier, 8,500 seeds per year. And that can last up to 60 years in the soil. So if you can take away that at first, rather than mulch it, if you mulch it, of course it's going to blitz them seeds back onto the ground, and you're just renewing the crop of rushes in the field. So the very first thing is to get those old rushes out of there, and that allows the young rush up. The other thing it does is it forces the rush plants on the ground to to generate new plants from their own resources, and that depletes the plant over time and can lead to certainly a much less rate of the plant growing back. Now, topping on its own is unlikely to get rid of the rushes unless you're going to top them more than 4 or 5 times a year, but at least it allows the young rush up, and then you can come in with your product then, be it through a weed liquor, which is MCPA, weed liquor is glyphosate, which is Roundup, Gallop, that type of product. And that is the only product that's licensed for use in a weed liquor. And then the other thing is MCPA through a boom sprayer. And MCPA can only be applied with a boom sprayer. And that's just important to know, because it seems that a lot of people aren't aware of those rules. And if the rushes are young and green, you should get a decent kill. Now, what I would suggest is using a commercial sticker. A lot of people put on something like Fairy Liquid, but a commercial sticker like Presto or Cantor or something like that will give you, make sure you get a very tight application to the actual stem. There's a thick cuticle on the stem, and if you get a good contact on that, you'll get a much better result with a commercially available sticker than you will ideally with nothing at all.
Peter Varley ending that report there. Now, the Netherlands, with their small landmass and high stocking rate, is often seen as a driving force in agricultural innovation. Our correspondent was in the country, where he spoke to Jaap Unk, chairman of the manure group at the Dutch Contractors Association Kumla, about how phosphate rights apply to farmers in the Netherlands.
Yeah, in the Netherlands, all the pig farmers, poultry farmers and dairy farmers have production rights. They need production rights for livestock farming. When they have no rights, then it is not possible to produce eggs, milk or meat.
And how are these rights related to environmental standards? How are they calculated?
They are all these rights are based on kilogram phosphate production.
So, for example, if you want to start a dairy farm or add more cows to your dairy farm, how does that work? How do you get those rights?
You have to buy these rights from other companies who are decreasing their livestock production, or they finished their farm. So it is a matter of market, from buying rights on the market.
Is it similar to the quota system that was there for milk in the past?
Yes, it is similar to the quota system. When they finished the quota system in 2015, it was period free in the Netherlands, but we saw a big increasing of our milk production, and that means there must be a stop from the government, and they have introduced last year production rights, phosphate rights for dairy cows.
So if I wanted to start a dairy farm today, how much would it cost me to buy those rights for each cow?
I think nowadays between 9,000 and 10,000 euros per milk cow.
Okay.
For production rights. So it's based on 43 kilogram phosphate, and 1 kilogram phosphate is nowadays 230 euros.
Thomas Hubert with that report. And that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, or if you're at Tullamore Show this weekend, feel free to drop into our tent. The sound engineer this week was Ferdy O'Mooney, and I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.